Welcome to the Steve Barkley Ponders Out Loud podcast. As instructional coaches and school leaders, you are tasked with guiding continuous teacher growth to create student success. This podcast looks to support you with strategies from experienced guests, as well as my own insights that I've gathered over the years. I'm thrilled to have you with us. Thanks for tuning in. Coaching with intention for instructional growth. I'm excited to have Sherry St. Clair return to our podcast. Sherry is the author of Coaching Redefined, a guide to learning meaningful instructional coaching, and recently released Intentional Instructional Moves, Strategic Steps to Accelerate Student Learning. Sherry and I had the opportunity to reconnect recently while we both presented at Jim Knight's TLC conference, and the schedule allowed us to attend each other's sessions. Welcome back, Sherry, and congrats on the new book.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
So I'm wondering, for starters, what was the inspiration behind Intentional Instructional Moves? And I'm assuming the use of the word intentional is important.
Yes, it is important. Well, as you know, with my first book, Coaching Redefined, I wrote that one for instructional leaders, whether that be instructional coaches or administrators who were coaching teachers to better instruction. And as I worked with school systems, they would frequently ask me for resources for teachers. It was always, Sherry, we don't have enough time to pull this together. We don't have enough time to read a whole book on rigor. Can you just give us the nuggets and then some practical steps in how to implement that? Even some school systems had paid me to put together these handbooks for teachers, and I would come and work with them on that. And it was such a massive project that inevitably it would get lost because they just didn't have the time. And so I just thought, this is something I could do for them in my role. I can step back and just look at what makes effective instruction in a classroom. And not that, whole books are needed on some of these topics. They're deep topics, and there are some great books out there. But what I really wanted to do for school systems is just pull out those golden nuggets of research and information, and then to also help school leaders and teachers think about, if I were coaching this, what's the first thing I would do? Or if I was in a classroom and trying to implement this, what's the first step I would take? What's the next step? And that's where that intentionality came as part of the title, because as I wrote this, I was thinking, we're breaking down each one of these components and helping teachers think, cognitively about why you do what you're doing, and those little steps that we can take to make our classroom practices more effective. So that's where, the inspiration for this book started. And where I've used it so far, I'm getting such great feedback from it. I'm super excited to have it rolled out. This has been a 2+ years of research in the making. And when I say research, it's, research from the reading of research, but also on the ground working with schools and what works, and talking to students and talking to teachers. And so it's been a joy to pull it together, but I'm glad it's released as well.
Well, as I looked through the chapters, they address so many key areas for teachers to build their skills. And I'm wondering if you'd kind of just give us a kind of a run through the list of the areas that you've looked at and how you envision it as a resource for instructional coaches and instructional leaders.
Sure. So, this book doesn't address everything that happens in a classroom by any stretch of the imagination. That's part of teaching. It's all just so different in every classroom. But what I tried to do is I tried to help school systems thinking about the things that, according to research, had the greatest impact on student learning. And with Coaching Redefined and with this book, there's really three components that I'm pulling in. And it's the skills that students are going to need for their careers, according to the World Economic Forum research, which looks at Fortune 500 companies and the skills that students need for those. The social emotional skills, so that we can build that student with that self-awareness, social awareness, self-management skills, and then the research on how students retain content, so that we are doing less reteaching and more retention of content. And any strategy that I use in this book or Coaching Redefined needs to meet those three criteria. And then I really thought about what schools were telling me were their needs. And those were needs brought to me by teachers and brought to me by school leaders as well. And I tried to lay it out in a way that made sense as far as if schools were just thinking about implementing effective instruction, but really schools can take this book and just use it for the chapter that they are trying to focus on. But some of the areas I address are classroom management, engagement, rigor, relevance, standards-based lessons, direct instruction, assessment for and assessment of learning, scaffolding and differentiation, growth mindset, goal setting, which Marzano and Hattie both agree is one of the top ways that students can manage their own learning and learn. We talk about group work and student presentations, student discourse, and classroom community. And, all those components are important in schools. And schools are juggling so much. Like I say, they know these things are important, but they can't always just do a book study on every one of those. So how do we help teachers understand these important components, but also to not get overwhelmed by them and to be able to think about intentionally how to implement them more effectively?
So I saw that you have a companion guide to go with the book. What does that do?
Yes, so really the companion guide is another whole book. And I really debated on how to release that. I could have printed a second book. I could have made this one, twice as long. But I decided to move that to an online component because I think it makes us stop and reflect about what it is that we need without just rushing through and reading all of it. So basically, in the print book, you have the research behind each one of these practices, and then you have intentional steps to implement them, just an overview of the intentional step. And then you can decide which intentional step you would like to focus on. And you go to that correlating part in the companion guide. And there you find very detailed directions on how to implement that step and the resources that go with it. So I have over 50 ready to go handouts that go with each one of these resources so that teachers do not have to purchase anything else. They can just pull that down. They don't have to make anything. It is there. Use it as is and go. And those resources, I've tried to address various grade levels so that if you're teaching elementary school, there's resources for you, middle and high school. So they're, grade appropriate for schools.
So I'm wondering what caught me is your focus on going from research to implementation. And I'm wondering if you'd pick one of the strategic areas that you look at. You read off so I'm just amazed by the list of what you tackled in one book. But I wondered if you'd pick just one of them and just kind of give a description of if I was working through that chapter and moving from the research on it to how I get it implemented in my classroom. Walk us through that.
Sure. So one of the ones I am asked to coach in quite frequently is the area of engagement. And it's a pretty hot topic right now in education, as you know, and it should be. It absolutely should be. And as we dig into it, it is important to be able to break it down and think about engagement at a much deeper level. We're pretty good in education about throwing around terms and then just expecting people to know what they mean and implement it and, sprinkle fairy dust over people and there you go, it's implemented. So with engagement, I have broken it down into 3 areas of engagement. You have behavioral, emotional, and cognitive engagement. And behavioral engagement is basically what students are doing when you're in the classroom. So if a teacher asks everybody to follow along on page 49, that the students are following along on page 49. It's the behavior that students are doing. Cognitive engagement is what they're thinking about while the teacher is leading the lesson. And emotional engagement has to do with, are they emotionally connected to the content? Are they bored with the content? Are they emotionally safe in the classroom? And all 3 of those components are important. I know many schools will start with behavioral engagement, but quite frankly, emotional engagement is a key that pulls it all together. If we look at Hattie's research, and if students are bored in classes, the effect size of that is minus 0.49. So it's much harder to get students to be able to connect to the content and put in the effort to persevere if they are not emotionally connected to that. So I've broken it down with that research and then gone into each one of those areas and broken down intentional steps for implementing those. So if you're going to be implementing behavioral engagement first, then what 3 steps might you take and what are the strategies that go with that? And cognitive and emotional also have 3 steps to them. Not every chapter are there just 3 intentional steps. Some have 5, some have 2, some have 7. But I really did try to spend enough time in classrooms and talk to enough teachers and coach teachers to say this works here with step 1, and then you can move to this next step and try to put those in. Stephen, I don't want it to be teaching to sound formulaic because I don't think it is. There is an art to teaching. And so I never want to say you have to do step 2 before you do step 3. That's not the case. But I have tried to think about it just in chunks because what we sometimes do as coaches and school leaders is we go into a classroom and say, well, Sherry, if you could just improve the engagement, then I think the students would be more excited in your classroom. And we walk away and that's the support the teacher gets, right? I mean, we do that to teachers. Or it might be that we say, your behavioral engagement needs to be better. And if you can work on that and see you later. And so this book is really resource for teachers. This one is written to the audience of teachers to say, here's your support. And instructional coaches and administrators can use it with teachers to say, we're just going to use this one chapter. But
that's what's jumping out at me, that I can pull you to this chapter.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And so that's another reason I wanted to put the intentional steps online and break them down online, is so that I don't get people just taking this book and saying, here, just implement this and you'll be good to go. But let's, if we're going to do an intentional step, they have to go in there and print that one step off and think about that one step and give that to people so that we don't overwhelm them.
Thanks. The message of not overwhelming them comes through. And I think coaches are overwhelmed by the number of different things they're having to work on. So I'm really hearing that you've put a tool out there for both for the teacher, but also for the instructional coach to guide, make it a lot easier for the instructional coach to guide the teacher.
That is my hope. That's my hope. And, if we look at Daniel Pink's research on how people change and what motivates them to change, one of those components is they have to feel like they can master it. And if we just dump something on their lap that's so overwhelming, that there's already a barrier in front of them for implementing it. So I think as leaders, the more intentional we can be. As coaches, the more intentional we can be. The teachers, the more intentional we can be. That clarity piece comes through, and we can make greater impact faster.
Sure, you work in many schools with lots of instructional leaders and coaches. What are you kind of seeing and sensing now as some of what we might label as the most critical teaching learning challenges that need our attention?
Um, Literacy, literacy is one, even that I just it just breaks my heart when we see students who are going through our entire school system not being able to read and write. We know the impact that has on society in whole, and we know what an impact it has on the lives of those individuals. I mean, they are more likely to be on social services, not vote, be incarcerated. They are more likely to earn a lower income. So I really feel strongly that we have to do everything we can to raise literacy rates. And you will see in intentional instructional moves that I have very intentionally put strategies in there that require students to read, write, and speak, because I think we have for years told teachers to integrate it into their classrooms, and yet they get maybe a week or two of instruction on how to do that in their teacher prep programs. Some of them get more. If they're ELA, they will get more, but sometimes that's all they get, and that's been years ago. So literacy is on my mind heavily. And then I think the social emotional skills, and it's just where our world is right now. But we have lost our way in terms of connecting with humans, and remembering that we're all humans and we're not perfect, and that we're all trying to learn how to navigate this world. So that's why I feel strongly about bringing those social emotional skills also into the practices.
So, kind of tie this together. What are you seeing as some of the most important skills for instructional coaches and instructional leaders to be developing, and how do you see the best way for them to go about doing that?
Hmm. Well, I think I think we cannot forget the importance of relationships with those that we serve. I frequently say you cannot serve those who do not know. And the better you can know them, the greater you can serve them. So, in Coaching Redefined, I talk about doing a listening tour and making sure that we truly know the needs of those that we are serving. That would be a key. And then I also think there's a difference between having a personal relationship with people, which I think it's important for leaders to have personal relationships with those they serve, but also to have an instructional relationships with those they serve. And by that, I mean, we need to be strong enough in the science of learning and knowing how students learn, so that those that we serve know when we walk into their classroom, we're not just giving them a different idea, but we're collaborating with them on a better idea. And that we're not walking into their classroom expecting perfection, but we're walking into their classroom and hoping to see their growth, and hoping to see them try new things that are going to sometimes fail, but will lead to better learning. It makes me so sad when I walk into school systems and teachers get so nervous about having somebody in their classroom, because they're so focused on being perfect versus understanding that teaching, it is an art, and it's not going to be perfect. And that's part of being a teacher, is just trying and keep growing and keep trying new things. So leaders who are looking for growth versus perfection, I think when they have those conversations with teachers, they set up a different culture in their school than leaders who are just looking that, standards are on the board, and, this checklist of things that they can go down through and see.
Yeah, I've been moving more and more towards describing a large part of the role of the coach as a thought partner.
Absolutely.
Because teaching is exploring possibilities. As you've said, there's no one right way. There's no this is going to solve the problem. It's it's a thought partner that plays a role in designing the next experiment that the teacher's gonna run.
Absolutely. And and it's not always going to go well. Right? That's just part of teaching. It's part of learning, a part of leading. It's not always going to be perfect, but yes, the more that we as leaders can push that idea of we're partnering with you, we're walking beside you, we're just looking for growth, then I think
Learning with you.
learning with you, absolutely. And Stephen, I really do think that this book that I'm put out is just that. It is the learning that I have done with teachers. I mean, almost every strategy that I have in here has been co-developed through my work with coaching. And I mean, it's an honor to get to do that work with teachers.
Well, Sherry, thank you so much for sharing the book. I'd put the recommendation out there for folks. Matter of fact, my recommendation is in the front of the book for to encourage folks to pick it up. Would you tell folks the best way that listeners can connect with you?
Yes, I'm most active on Facebook right now. I don't know about you, but I have trouble keeping up with them all and doing my daily work. But I am on X under Sherry St. Clair as of right now. I am on Instagram, Sherry St. Clair, and Facebook at Sherry St. Clair. But mostly Facebook is where I get to interact with people, and individuals can always reach out to me on my website. It's reflecttolearn.com, and connect with me there. And I do want to say too, this publisher has been awesome about giving discounts on book orders of 10 or more, which I think makes it really reasonable for schools if they're trying to give this, do a book study with their teachers. So if you have people on your podcast who are looking to do that, have them contact me before they go to Amazon or Barnes and Noble or somewhere.
All right, we'll be sure to put the your website in the lead-in and encourage people to connect with you there.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
Thanks for listening, folks. I'd love to hear what you're pondering. You can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn at Steve Barkley, or send me your questions and find my videos and blogs at barkleypd.com.